Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dorothy Noyes. I'm the director of the Mershon Center for International Security Studies at The Ohio State University. Welcome to Seeking Peace at Home, Central Ohio Faith Leaders Speak. The difficulty of introducing this conversation points to the purpose of this conversation. It's impossible to speak of the events of October 7th and everything that's happened since in language that will win intellectual consensus, much less emotional consensus. Destroying common language is what violence does. Of course, this isn't the only thing violence does. Violence awakens prior violence, it invites future violence, and it reaches outward to connect to other impulses and occasions of violence. The current violence in Israel and Palestine has echoed globally. Central Ohio has not been immune. On and off the Ohio State campus, we've seen online and in-person harassment, as well as physical aggression against individuals perceived to be aligned with the conflict. Anti-Semitism and Islamophobia have found new scope for expression in this moment. They have been amplified with malice and recklessness. Groups whose ethnic or religious associations are salient in this conflict are living in fear. They are also concerned that they are not being seen and will not be affirmed by larger institutions or the larger community. People divided by loyalties and opinions are united by doubts and vulnerabilities. Those of us who are not marked out by the conflict or forced to engage with it are not always much help, especially those of us in leadership roles. Leaving our formal obligations aside, we're afraid of making mistakes. The public sphere was already disordered by polarization and social media. Then the pandemic hastened the erosion of our interpersonal skills. Words fail us, fail me. I've said things I ought not to have said, and I've left unsaid things I ought to have said. I'm feeling in the wrong myself, and in that I'm tempted to blame others, and I'm more strongly tempted to just give up. This webinar is meant to draw on the experience of people who haven't given up and who have wrestled with the problem of words. Our speakers today have worked in the field of interfaith dialogue, and this is one of many contemporary initiatives that seek to address the challenge of coexistence across difference through managed dialogue. We have many of these at Ohio State, the Divided Community Project at the Moritz College of Law, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion's workshops on difficult conversations, the Institute for Democratic Engagement and Accountability, and the Compass series organized by the Center for Ethics and Human Values. I know there are many others I'm not aware of. But today we're moving beyond the campus and beyond those dialogue projects to engage in some comparative reflection. Our speakers today aren't here to represent their faiths, even their specific tradition or congregation. They're not here to pronounce on the conflict between Israel and Gaza. They're here to reflect on the challenges faced by committed professionals who feel a triple duty: a duty to their people, the community they've grown up with, love, and are loyal to; a civic duty, they're concerned to protect our complex coexistence in Central Ohio at large and in the close quarters of workplaces, educational institutions, and organizations. And finally, they feel a duty to the real. They want to work towards a just assessment of facts and causes and responsibilities. And they want to work towards the right action that could be shaped from a right understanding. They know there's no straight line to truth, but they're not prepared to give up on it. All thinking people right now, whether they're students or professors or business owners, elected representatives, or just members of a family who are trying not to shout down each other at the Thanksgiving table, are all facing this challenge. How do we keep in balance loyalty, peace, and truth? Our speakers will tell you they don't have all the answers. They lie awake in the middle of the night, just like the rest of us. But the fact that they all said an immediate yes to our invitation tells you that they're doing their very best to engage, and we are extremely grateful to them for their generosity in putting themselves forward today. So in alphabetical order, they are Imran Malik Awan, who is the appointed commissioner of the City of Columbus Community Relations Commission. Among a plethora of civic and service roles, he's the founding member of SAIL, the Safe Alliance of Interfaith Leaders of Northwest Columbus, and he's the founder of Abraham's Tent, a Central Ohio interfaith service organization. Sharon Mars is the senior rabbi of Temple Israel, Columbus. She has played a wide variety of pastoral roles at campuses, community centers, correctional facilities, and hospice care across Central Ohio. Amy Miracle is pastor and head of staff at Broad Street Presbyterian Church in Columbus, where she has been a proponent of less anxious leadership. We all really want to know about this. I want to thank all of our Ohio State co-sponsors, the Center for Ethics and Human Values, the Center for the Study of Religion, the Department of History, the Department of Near Eastern and South Asian Languages and Cultures, the Melton Center for Jewish Studies, and the Middle Eastern Studies Center. Special thanks to Scott Levi of the Department of History for making the contacts with our participants, and to the Mershon staff for supporting the webinar. Of course, the views we'll be expressing today are those of the participants and may not reflect the views of their associated organizations, the Ohio State sponsoring units, or the Ohio State University. We invited attendees to submit questions in advance, and these reflected the variety of positions, the range of emotions, and the common hunger to understand the Israeli-Palestine conflict and to imagine a way towards justice and/or peace. But the preponderance of questions were directed to our immediate topic, seeking peace at home, and people overwhelmingly wanted to know what they could do. What can an individual do to lessen the division and violence in our nation? How can local faith communities help? How to help each other remain safe in our local community and on a broader scale? So a discussion will work its way up toward these larger questions. We have a pretty full agenda, but if we can, we'll incorporate some questions from the Q&A as we go. So we're going to start by helping our audience to get to know a little bit about our participants personally and the framework that they bring to us. So let me ask all of you how you became motivated to work in interfaith dialogue, what actually is interfaith dialogue, and what kind of interfaith dialogue goes on in Central Ohio. And Imran, maybe we'll start with you here.
Thank you, Dory. And before I start, if this is okay with the panelists and the audience in general, since we are not directly interacting with them, if you can take a moment of silence, like maybe a 10-second to say a small prayer in our hearts for a global peace. Thank you, everyone, for that small, acceptance of gesture on my part. So where we start, I think I always begin my conversation when it comes to interfaith dialogue with think global but act local. We are living in a very congested world, and it's only becoming bigger and bigger and larger, but it's also becoming more connected because of the technology that we all have. Our greater Columbus population right now is about 1.1 or 1.2 million, constituents all over Columbus area, and of which about 15 to 20%, depending on what resources you look into, is the Muslim population footprint. So I always tell people that, we are living in a very connected world. And the only way we can move forward is by creating relationships. And these relationships will only happen when we are able to understand each other's cultural, religious, rituals, and traditions. And unless we don't take that proactive effort to learn from each other, we will not be able to bring value to each other's, living experiences. We are all neighbors, colleagues, friends, in many ways and form might be related to, one another within the communities as well. So the only way forward, again, is by mutual respect and dignity. We are grateful to the social media.
Perhaps We will give Imran a moment to get reconnected, and perhaps Sharon, may I turn to you while we wait?
Absolutely. I think he was just thinking technology for a moment, and there it went. Well, thank you so much for hosting this, and Dory, for all of your stewardship, along with Scott Levi. And it's just so, I have to say, in a time of such turbulence, to know that I have interfaith colleagues such as Amy Miracle and Imran Malik is a total blessing. I can't say that everyone I know among my interfaith colleagues necessarily has people even in their immediate communities they can turn to. So it is really huge. For me, interfaith dialogue over my 25 years of being a rabbi is really about deep, empathetic listening, being able to hold space and hear each other's pain and acknowledge it, and my ability to say, this hurts, or this is amazing. It's not a place where we convert each other to each other's thinking. I come from a practice of which kind of combines a lot of Judaism with a little bit of Buddhism, which means that my favorite way of intersecting with other people is to be able to hold space and to be able to allow one person at a time to say, I've spoken, and for others in the circle to say, I heard you, without going in to judgment, without trying to dissect a person's arguments. So it's really sharing our hearts with each other, knowing that we're just going to hold and out. And it's helped to teach me that when we do listen in interfaith dialogue, we listen to each other's values, to what the other person is expressing. I hear that you are scared. I hear that justice is important to you. It actually makes it easier to listen when you focus on the values being put forth. And I want to underscore something that Imran said, which is so true, that I think what you see in front of you, just noting the numbers of times we've each had lunch with each other and coffee and talked about each other's families and kids and so on, it's all about relationship. Where can I find resonance in my own experience with this person from a different faith tradition? And also, where can I appreciate the dissonance that's there? Otherwise, I'm just subjected to my own echo chamber 24/7, right? So, in all the time that I've been growing up in LA, moving to New York, living in North Carolina, living for quite some time, 5 years in Israel, not all at once, but I've come to really appreciate, and actually North Carolina also, I've come to really appreciate the diversity of faith. And it makes it easier when crisis moments erupt to have that interfaith community that I can actually turn to say, can we talk about God in the midst of the fact that we have to organize, the fact that we have to do a press conference together, we have to celebrate or mourn together, and having that essential language there that I know that is shared among my colleagues here and elsewhere, really makes it possible for us as leaders to lift up our own moral and spiritual voices, which is what our communities crave.
Thank you. I see Amy nodding. Let's maybe go to Amy, and then since we have Imran back, we can ask him to talk a little bit about what it looks like organizationally. Amy.
Oh, thank you for that. I wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity for this conversation, and I'm so delighted to be sharing it with these two colleagues. And I want to acknowledge that this has been a challenging season on the campus. And with finals a week out, that this is a time that is extremely anxious and stressful. And I hope that our time together, we can take a deep breath together and remember both what grounds us and also what connects us to one another. As was stated at the beginning, I don't speak for the rest of the church or Christendom. I'm a local pastor at a church here in Columbus, and I've been here for about 15 years. When I thought about where my engagement with people of other faith traditions happened, for me, it started young. my best friend growing up was Jewish. And I spent a lot of time growing up in synagogues, and in some ways felt more comfortable there than I did at my own church. As a graduate student, I found myself living in an international house where the people I lived with were Hindu, Buddhist, and we had Muslims from 5 different countries living there. And for me, that was an experience that shaped the rest of my life. And that's what I took into my adulthood. I think of interfaith less dialogue than I do interfaith experiences, because I do think that it is so relational. And often the best work that is done in understanding people of other backgrounds and traditions isn't when we're directly talking about what is different, but instead we are doing things together. We're serving together. We're serving in a food pantry together. And my absolute favorite interfaith activity is to eat together. And there's something about breaking bread and delighting together in conversation and food that takes some of the pressure off and really helps facilitate genuine interaction and understanding.
Imran, do you want to say a little bit more about what this is like organizationally?
Thank you. And I apologize. I got interrupted with a phone call and it just disconnected me. So I completely, second what Rabbi Sharon mentioned and what Amy mentioned in regards to interfaith work. We are living in a very globalized world, and Columbus is becoming one of the global cities as well in the mixes of North America. So definitely, there's a lot that we can learn from each other. There's multiculturalism, multi-ecumenism work that we can do together, and that is exactly what our focality has been for the last 25 plus years. I would like to give a couple of examples of historically what people may have not known about, especially those who are new to the Columbus ecology. The oldest working relationship of interfaith work between 2 communities, the Jewish and the Muslim community, goes back to late 1970s. And that is long before the interfaith work actually even started in Columbus area. The first Islamic center, the Broad Street Islamic Center, was a small house that was purchased and converted into a mosque, and that happens to sit right next to one of the largest and oldest synagogues of Columbus as well, the Tiferet Israel. So, of course, with the Muslim community growing in size, there was always a parking issue, especially on our Friday service days. And this was also covered in last year's Ramadan, coverage during Iftars and the Dispatch article as well. The Jewish community opened their parking lot and their hearts to the Muslim community because they were not using their space on Friday. So we were able to park our, overflowing traffic cars and avoiding the citation from Columbus police and rescued our, traffic into the synagogue. And that partnership has been there for last almost 45 plus years. Rabbi Harold Berman, Jack Chomsky, Rabbi Hillel and Alex Brewer, they have been still, honoring and respecting that friendship because, that is brought a lot of memorable events and activities and opportunity to do service work together as well. And as Amy mentioned, interfaith is less of a dialogue and more of a work, more of a service-oriented work based on the commonalities of all of us. We are not in a business of converting each other. As Rabbi Sharon mentioned, we are in the business of agreeing to disagree, but still be able to work together on those common factors that bring our communities together. And that's where, the focality is all around bridge building work. We have taken the interfaith work and converted it into the suburban interfaith dialogue as well. If you look into this American footprint in general, majority of the interfaith work historically has been part of the metro ecologies, but the suburban interfaith dialogue was not very prominent until early 2000s to 2010 timeframe. And in Greater Columbus area, we were able to form SAIL, which is the Safe Alliances of Interfaith Leaders, to bring the churches and the other faith-based communities in the suburban Greater Columbus area into dialogue and into service work together. So that was kind of like a spotlight that we kind of took at a national level, because a lot of other communities all around America started borrowing that model of having suburban interfaith dialogue, in their communities as well. And then ever since then, there has been no stopping back. Just like Amy mentioned her personal experiences, I myself was born in Pakistan. My parents moved to Bahrain. I grew up in a very small island, but a very diversified country to begin with. Witnessed firsthand, not within it, but the overflows of the 9-year Iraq-Iran war that happened in the region, and then a 2-year of peace, and then we had the first Desert Storm war that happened in the Arabian Gulf as well. So yeah, I mean, I've seen the conflict and how it impacts, the relationships, the economics, the infrastructure, and even the human values often at time. But it is only through the initiatives of bringing people together, connecting hearts and minds together, that you're able to, isolate all those negativities and bring communities on positivity. And, I feel myself very lucky that, I grew up in that environment and had that global experience long before I came here to the United States as an international student. Went to Wright State from undergrad, and all since then had the opportunity to make those connections with the diversity and multiculturalism that exists in our beautiful, Columbus, Ohio. So.
Yeah.
And sorry for a mouthful of answer. I just wanted to rush through that. I know I kind of dropped off a little bit. So
No, I think it's great to hear about sorry, I don't know why we have an echo, about the Columbus ecology of this and the way that it intertwines with personal histories of just the practical need for collaboration, the practical need to respond to events, including the parking problem. That's great. Let's, I guess, now turn to the present and turn sort of inwards to your own communities. Our audience just wondered in part how your congregations, those of you who manage congregations, but how your communities were being affected by the events in Israel and Gaza and by all this spillover. How are they reacting? How are they feeling it? Perhaps, Sharon, maybe we would begin with you here.
Well, thank you. And I think it's safe to say that I appreciate very much you're saying that I'm speaking for myself and just based on what I've witnessed. But I think a safe statement is that it's been a harrowing time for Jews everywhere. Mm-hmm. I think many, if not most, Jewish people in the US and globally feel at once a renewed connection to their Jewish identity since the war began. Mm-hmm. And also a horrified shock at the tsunami of anti-Semitism that we've encountered as a community since October 7th. Everything feels different, I have to say. And it's because of trauma. Such a small community will feel just shockwaves for a very long time. I think it may have been overused, but 9/11 is the best analogy to 10/7. Triggering sort of intergenerational trauma. We've got Holocaust survivors who were taken, and very reminiscent of some pogroms that we've seen in the past. And by some statistics, anti-Semitism is up 400% since October 7th. So I'm the senior rabbi of a mid-sized Reform synagogue in Columbus, and the Reform branding makes us a naturally liberally minded place, which does its best to be warm and welcoming to every person who seeks a home in the Jewish community. And I would say that since October 7th, we've had to sort of like really look at, of all things, our security more than anything else. And I've been having to answer a lot of panic phone calls and texts and emails about how afraid should we be, Rabbi? And that's not how I typically lead. I try not to lead from a place of fear, but a place of love. And but this time makes it essential for us to be really mindful of safety, It's probably no different in any Jewish institution anywhere in the world. So my folks are scared, but I also want to say that our siblings in the Muslim community may feel very similarly. And what's so terrible, I just have to mention, is that, in so many ways we're pitted against each other. And it's just very, very painful. So the biggest priority for us, aside from security, is education. The current conflict and those that preceded it for the past many, many years of Israel's history, not to mention the millennia before that, are incredibly complex in nature. I mean, really, I try to hold my own confusion at the same time, and I try to be transparent with that. There are so many facts to hold. This is not a linear understanding. There's no way to really wrap one's mind around it. So my goal is to help people in my congregation, in my midst, to feel less isolated and alone and misunderstood, and to hold their sadness, and to also, never ever stop mentioning that there is human suffering that is the common denominator here among everything else and all of the facts that we're trying to get right and wrapping our arms around this whole conflict. So I think that is really where I lead from, is this essential place of how we are human, and also lifting up the ways in which we are different and blessed to be that way, and to hold that, to hold both truths, all truths at the same time with our two hands.
Yeah. Imran, Sharon has spoken from the experience of a particular congregation. And we have, of course, a hugely diverse Muslim community in Columbus, from all kinds of countries, from all different generations of migration, from all different faith tendencies. So I know you can't make any kinds of general statements, but insofar as anybody labeled Muslim is, in a sense, taken as associated with this conflict, how do you see it redounding on our communities?
So very much like in line with what Rabbi Sharon mentioned, the Muslim, there are about 28 mosques in general in Greater Columbus area. Some of them are as large as Nur Islamic Culture Center or Masjid Abu Bakr or Masjid Ibn Taymiyyah, which are very large congregations comparatively to the others, which are some, to the scalability of like smaller houses converted to serve certain neighborhoods and associations in Greater Columbus area. So with that, diversity and that vastness of different sizes of communities that exist in different pockets of Columbus, definitely there's a lot that we are in general, dealing with as well. The sensitivities and the emotions are very high. And as Rabbi Sharon mentioned, that it's the components of humanity that, we always focus on, that how we can console that the human component, keeping politics, of course, out of the, conversation. We are in the business of serving communities. We're not in the business of, doing politics. So that is what our focus is as community leaders, as community liaisons, or laymen as well. In general, there has been, this is not the first instance that has occurred and scarred the community or taken or shooken the communities all over, Central Ohio and beyond, both in the Muslim and the Jewish, side of the house as well. Like war in Ukraine and other instances of Islamophobia or anti-Semitism that happen every time. It just draws us back to the same living experiences that, of the past as well. So we try to, build the connections and the band-aids for the consolation to move forward. But again, since October 7th, there has been a lot that, we all have been dealing internally with our communities and also with community at large. We definitely appreciate all the support, that is being rendered by all the other faith communities and the cultural communities that is brought to our support. And I'm sure that is also being reciprocated over to the Jewish brothers and sisters as well. In the end, I would also like to say that we have always found ways to stay connected, between the community, like the Jewish and the Muslim and the Christian and the Hindu communities. We have always found that the opportunities that events like these, which happen, on the other side of the world, they definitely impact us here locally because, we all have a lot of connections, with different communities all over the world as well. So we like to always focus on that opportunity where our human components can be a reason for us to stay connected. Now, whether it's through the opportunity of getting together for vigils or, doing prayer services together, as we did one last night for ICO, which is our 8th annual, prayer service event. We did bringing 8 different faith communities together to pray for world peace. So, we always look forward to those occasions, but our tendencies and our initiatives and our long-term mission is we don't want to meet more frequently on sad occasions, but we want to do events on more positive and happy occasions. And but unfortunately, we are living in a world which is very large. There's always going to be mishaps and events where conflicts, whether they are man-made or whether they are disasters, which are natural calamities like floods and hurricanes and other activities that really trigger the human race in negative or positive way. But at least on a local perspective, we like to see that as a positive opportunity for us to do more outreach or build more outreach and focus on our improving our in-reaches as well. I think I've spoken enough, but I think there are more questions that will come. I can probably relate some more examples. One of the examples, sorry, before I give the floor to Amy, is as I mentioned, this is not the first time this has happened. There are other past incidents where each of our communities might have been targeted or marginalized in certain way, whether through a hate crime or whether through a just a political backlash. We always stood together. So one of the examples I remember very clearly, because that happened very in the recent past before COVID, was the shooting at the synagogue of Tree of Life in Pittsburgh. And Jack Chomsky, who is now retired, from Tiferet, Israel, he and I were able to take a delegation of our Jewish Muslim friends and community members from Columbus to visit the community in Pittsburgh. And of all the graces that or all the honors that we can talk about, we were floored to the point that we were the only community in the entirety of American outreaches that were allowed to visit the community of Tree of Life Synagogue, because Jack Chomsky had a good relationship with the rabbi at Tree of Life. So it was an honor, but it was always like a privilege that we were able to also signify to our local credentials that the work that we have done in the local community for so many years. So again, same way when the New Islamic Culture Center in the past have received like hate mails and have been victimized or marginalized by hate crimes, the Jewish community and the interfaith partners, their leaders, they came out and stood outside Nur in a circle as a protecting shield to send the message that an attack on Nur or an attack on Muslim community in Central Ohio is an attack on all of us. So I think we are very confident that we have built a very solid foundation of trust, relationship, and partnership in the faith, in the multi-faith community in Central Ohio. And we are hoping that, as things eases up on the other side of the world, we will be able to play a very important role in, further working and further building the bridges in this direction. So.
Yeah, thank you. Amy, of course, you are not dealing with a vulnerable community, but I bet your congregation is not immune from politics. Can you talk a bit about what they're feeling and how they are reacting to events where they're not directly imbricated?
Right. No, and I also want to start off by saying, if we look historically, my tradition, the Christian tradition, our track record in terms of how we have treated Muslims and Jews, it's very bad. It's that's just a part of our history that we are trying. I know in my little corner of the world, we're trying really hard to forge a different path. And just one example, yesterday in our worship service, our choir sang Dona Nobis Pacem, which is give us peace. And they sang it in Latin, and then they sang it in Hebrew, and then they sang it in Arabic. And for us, recent events feel different than other geopolitical things that happen in our world. it feels like this has been something that's happened to our extended family. And we are, our three religious traditions, we're all children of Abraham, we're all people of the book. I mean, we are connected to one another historically, and we're connected to one another in this community. And much of what we've been experiencing is, we've been weeping with Israelis, and we've been weeping with Palestinians, and we've been weeping with you all in your communities as you are experiencing so much trauma and hate crimes and harassment, and that's kind of where we're at right now. I checked in the last week with as many of our folks as I could to ask them kind of what emotions they're experiencing these days, and they may be very similar to what a lot of the students are feeling. Hopelessness, cynicism, sadness, anger, depression. I heard a lot of people echoing the Psalms and asking, how long, O Lord, how long? And also, I think from what may be different in our community is uncertainty about when and how to speak, and I hear that echoed in a lot of different places, and I heard that echoed in your introduction. Wanting to be supportive and helpful, and not always knowing how to do that.
Yeah, let me take that to lead us into this question of speaking, which has become so difficult, both when we're trying to be supportive and when there's anger, and when there's an effort to put forward one's own understanding or quarrel with another understanding put forward. We had one registrant who asked about the use of the Israeli flag, and we've had a lot of discussion about the public use of symbols in a divisive climate, whether those are flags, whether they're the keffiyeh, all kinds of symbols that have very positive affirmative value for those who call on them, but are read differently by others and create vulnerability, of course, for people who are deploying them in public. What do you think about the politics of public symbols at a moment of this kind of delicacy? What advice are you giving to your own maybe friends and congregants?
Well, I would say that in my community, a little heartbreak that happened right at the beginning was that I had two recent converts to Judaism who were proudly exhibiting, in one case his yarmulke, in the other case her Star of David around her neck. And they were, given verbal rebuke for displaying those symbols, and then calling their rabbi and saying, I just don't get it. What just happened there? And my advising them, and I've since a little bit with tail between my legs, because I'm a very proud Jew, and I try to encourage other people to be proud of who they are, whatever their identities are. I gave them the advice that there's a Jewish value of being proud, and there's also a Jewish value of being safe, and it's called pikuach nefesh, which is preservation of life. And I had to say, in so many words, God will forgive us for being cautious right now, and that certainly, I probably will suffer some rebuke also in terms of people not agreeing with me, and that's fine. I'm trying to hold my communities right now as they are struggling with how to display symbols of who they are. Because we know that symbols carry so much power and they're representative of certain values, and God forbid we confuse these symbols with any kind of, I represent a government, I represent an organization, but we do. We have to also face the fact that these are representatives. So I will just give you one other quick little story, which was that around Halloween, we were told by the security community that that is, alerting Jewish organizations as to, what we should be alert for. And this has never happened in my life as a Jew in America, but we were told, if you're going to be opening your home on Beggar's Night, and you should be cautious of your mezuzah, which is maybe hanging in your doorpost, which is a symbol of a Jewish home, and so on. And so, Jewish homes have had to be cautious, and it's a very strange new reality to sort of be thinking of, how in ordinary times we can proudly display and not even necessarily think about what the ramifications are. But I do believe that right now, people are, certainly being triggered by these symbols. And in that way, we need to be open to having a dialogue about what it means to be proud and to be safe.
This raises questions not only about the differential vulnerabilities, but also we are in a sense placed in different ethical positions by our different relationships to this conflict. And I wanted to ask all of you perhaps to think about how we can be sensitive to our own position and to that of others. And with that, I want to give you one rather challenging question that came from the audience, which is, when you're trying to engage with others, how do you deal with egocentrism and self-aggrandizement, whether that's the bad faith of others or potentially our own? I don't know who would like to take that thorny question first, but what do we do about feeling okay in our own position and being mindful of that of others?
So I would just like to echo the sentiments that Rabbi Sharon mentioned earlier, to listen. And listening takes a lot of courage sometimes. Often at times we feel like, we have all the answers, but sometimes we feel like we don't have all the answers to somebody's questions. But I think the best aspect or the best aptitude in those situations where you are confronted with egocentric aptitudes or some very escalated sensitivities on somebody's part, the best thing is to let the person completely say what they have to say, and then try to find those soft points and common points where you can really reason with them on some critical logic or some of the experiences that they might have had in a very outlierish manner to kind of bring them to more of a positive spin. But again, listening is definitely very important. In this line of work, especially in the interfaith work, we are, again, not in the business of converting people, but, we're trying to bring people together on some common grounds. And those common grounds are always humanity-based, because we feel like our humanity has to be always higher and, positive to everyone at all times. And that's where we are able to, make some resonating connections often at times, even with people who are not willing to see eye to eye to begin with. But after the conversation, after talking and after having that communication, sometimes it's one communication, sometimes it's multiple series of dialogues you have to, keep in balance to really reach that point. So definitely, along with listening, patience is another temperament that you have to be able to, always have it on your sleeves, because we can coexist. And I will go back to the definition of coexist. I think it's about time we redefine. Coexist does not mean that, we are to be living in a melting pot. I think the old definition of American traditions that comes as the America as a melting pot, that also needs to be redefined. Melting pot means that you're going to lose all your personal identities and adapt to the new ones. I think America should be looked into more of a salad bowl persona, where like each and every constituent or each and every citizen brings a color, value, and retains that shape without even losing its ingredient values, but they are able to still add value to the overall salad bowl, but not be able to lose their own values in this whole bigger picture. So I think that's where we are kind of also trying to recoin the definition for the coexistence that is now becoming a bandwagon kind of salutation that yes, coexistence means that you're going to be able to merge into something newer. No, you can still hold your identities and values and be still respected and given all their dignity per the constitution of this country. That's where when Rabbi Sharon mentioned being safe and being also proud is it can coexist simultaneously. Someone can be a proud Muslim, someone can be a proud Jew, and they can be a proud American as well at the same time. They don't have to be one or the other. Yeah. So
but I can accept this intellectually. I can process it. I believe it. I agree with it. But I'm not, well, first of all, I'm not trained in it. I haven't got the long practice that you have. But I'm also emotional and I'm also vain. And I'm also, I'm not a great person all the time. And sometimes I just want to be right. And I want to get somebody to admit that I'm right. I cannot count on my own goodness to get me through this. So how can I be wary of my own motives in wanting to speak righteousness and getting it to be heard? What do the rest of you think about this?
Well, one word that has been helping me is the word humility, and I'm borrowing now from a Jewish practice, Musar, which says that humility is not taking up too much space, but it's also not taking up too little space. And I think that's both. And for me right now, that's a constant recalibration because it's that balance between holding on to your own integrity and your own understanding of who you are in the world, and also listening to others with genuine curiosity, with the intention that it's, I have printed over my desk at home. It's not about being right, it's about getting it right. And I have that printed over my desk because it's a challenge. But I think right at this particular moment, we all benefit as we take up that challenge.
Yeah. Well, so another listener tells us, not all conflict is wrong. There's a place for social conflict. And so they wanted to ask you how your faith perspective gets you through the occasional necessity of conflict. And another person also wanted to know, in the case that you do feel that faith gives you a way to move through necessary conflict, how does it work when engaging with people who don't share any faith, perhaps, who don't have the same framework of commitments? Sharon, maybe you have thoughts here.
Oh, I have thoughts for a dissertation on this, but I'll try to be short. So that, I always try to hold like a little Torah in my pocket, not the scroll Torah, but like the teaching. And so there are several things that I'm holding right now. One is that we've all been imbued with the divine image. We call it B'Tselem Elohim. We were created in the divine image. Every single person is of infinite worth. All people are fundamentally equal. Every single human life has something unique to contribute to this world. And I hold that with the other principle, straight from Torah, which is that we were all strangers. We were strangers in the land of Egypt, and so we should know and own the heart of the stranger, to really inculcate that into who we are. Holding both of those values, everyone being created in the divine image, we're all part of God's world, all the same. And also knowing, this great text on empathy, that we have to hold each other with empathy. And the other text that I hold is from the Talmud, which says, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim. these words over here said by this mouth and these words over here said by another mouth are both the words of the living God. So, all by way of saying we have to commit to radical empathy and to deep listening. It may sound like a broken record because I feel like I'm always saying it, but whoever is challenging us, despite their religious affiliation or lack thereof, has a say. And maybe what we each need, and I think every person who's on this call and every person in the the university setting, the congregational setting, the communal setting, needs to commit to being a leader in their own right, to be able to help shape a conversation where we can, as Amy said, come at it with genuine curiosity, and then know when to step in and step out and just kind of hold space and even say the great declaration that I wish I would hear more often, which is, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. Can we say something about how this works in kind of the immediate moment of the awful thing? And we've had so many of these moments in everyday's news when a terrible act of violence has just happened and somebody is reacting to it, and it is a hot button discussion where an argument about moral equivalence begins, or where we are suddenly mutually inflamed. How do we draw back from that moment of inflammation? How do we draw back from the immediate awful thing? Amy, do you?
Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I think that as individuals and as communities, we have practices that help us. And individually, those can be practices of prayer or meditation or communal conversation. And I think for our worshiping congregations, we have these structures and containers where I still remember opening up our church the week of September 11th and just saying, anyone who could come to be in the church at noon that week. And we didn't think anyone would come. And the church was full of people. And they were there to hear a word outside themselves that reminded them of the care and love of a creator, and to be with other humans doing these really simple ancient things, reading ancient words and singing old songs and being together in that way.
Ritual.
And I think when at least in our community, when the bad things happen, we gather together.
Imran, you wanted to add?
Yes, very much in line with what Rabbi Sharon mentioned earlier and what Amy just mentioned. Tragedies, whether they are natural calamities or conflicts which are man-made conflicts, whenever they occur, whether they're local in our own backyard in North America or whether in other parts of the world, I've always witnessed that it brings the communities together, whether it's through the services of prayers, rituals, or the rituals of giving, generosity, volunteering time to do some service work. We have always seen that it gets exponentially incremented. The very big example that we all lived through was the COVID just in this recent past, 2 or 3 years of isolation. And, it was the first time in the history of at least my lifetime that I saw the mosque was even closed, for many months. We were not able to go to our own, congregation to pray. Everything was being done online and remotely. And we thought, hey, what is the next world order going to look like once the COVID or the pandemic is done? And I remember having a conversation with Rabbi Mars on that topic as well. And we were wanting to see that if the Jewish community is also having these similar challenges and concerns that, how are we going to get normalized after the COVID? And yeah, I mean, what we saw in that period was exponential amount of growth in volunteerism, people who were not frequent attendees of our congregations, they were even willing to give time and their monetary resources to help out both local initiatives and global initiatives. So yeah, I mean, sometimes tragedies bring the best out of all of us as well. And then often a time, if you are looking into confrontational situations, I think our faith kind of plays a very pivotal role as well. We go back to the foundations, the basics of our own faith traditions and Islamic faith as well. Just like Rabbi Sharon mentioned, the sayings of the prophet or the guidances that we get from our holy book Quran, we follow those, and build the empathy and re-echo or reinforce the social empathy components that have already added value. One of my personal saying of a prophet Muhammad that really guides me on a daily basis is khairun nasi man yanfa'un nas, and that is actually etched and actually planted at the Social Justice Park of America, just down the street next to Amy's Church and the First Communities Church of Reverend Tim Aarons, which means the best human being is the one who's beneficial to the others. And it's just a saying of our prophet. And he specifically said the best human being. He did not say the best Muslim, because, our empathy, our kindness, and our tolerance and our patience should not be limited to our own communities. It should be universal. And that is the way I feel like when every day we get up, most of us who are in this line of work, that is what guides us, that, our empathy has to be open to each and every human that we get connected to. And we all believe that all humans, just like in Judaism, all humans are created on the nature or the sunnah of Lord Almighty. It's through his reflection that, the humanity and the human beings are created. So we are all children of God. We may call our God different names, but at the end of the day, there's humanity and there's the aspect of service that brings us all together. So,
yeah. We've gotten a question from the audience that continues on the question of public rhetoric, and he is wanting to know whether this would be for Sharon and Imran, whether you've noticed a difference in the way your communities are treated based on the ways that national leaders talk, that there is, of course, better and worse political rhetoric. And I guess we could also think of this in terms of advice for political figures, advice for public figures. What are ways of talk that redound negatively on communities, and what are ways that might be more constructive in our public rhetoric?
Oh, if I just had a direct line to certain political leaders, and if they would only listen to any of us, right? I mean, but I do feel like it is so tempting on all of our parts to equate what a political leader says with the entire people he or she is associated with. And I think it's critical that people take a step back and remember that politicians, people of elected office, are motivated by all kinds of reasons and trying to maybe, that maybe we'll never understand, maybe they're completely transparent. And I try to really ask people to take a step back and remind themselves that their words have wings, right? So when, if I were to be equated with the Netanyahu government, which I am, I'll just say frankly, I have deep dissension from so many of the decisions that are being made. But I really, what's so troubling is the impact that it has on, the reverberations in the communities all over the world. So I think it's really, really critical that our leaders understand their impact, and barring that, because we're not going to necessarily be able to have our wishes known all the way from here, or even within the country itself. And I do want to say that, one of the moments that I was proudest of leading up to this war was the fact that there were 40 weeks of protests that were happening within Israel that was opposed to some judicial overhaul that was being proposed in Israel. And I felt like that is my people rising up to say, this is who we are. And unfortunately, I think that with war comes some terrible, terrible calluses, and unfortunately, ears are not open in the same way that they were.
Yeah, of course. Do others of you want to add? I guess there is talking and then there's not talking. And I know a lot of people who are talking now about having to bite their tongues in front of their friends or their family or their colleagues, even when they're wanting to be comforting and supportive, not really knowing what to say. And so I guess I want to question for you that's not so much about dialogue, but about how you sustain relationships beyond dialogue at a moment when it's not really feasible to head straight at the issues of dissension. How do we show people that we recognize their value, in really kind of ways of everyday interaction, everyday coexistence? How do I acknowledge people around me with whom I know I'm on a basis of disagreement? What advice would you give to us, everyday relationships on campus, everyday relationships in the workplace?
Sorry, I was trying to find the mute button earlier, so I missed the opportunity to answer that. I think the whole philosophy is around connectivity and building relationships, and building relationships really take time. We cannot be reactive and expect that if things happen, whether positive or negative, and we come to the table or we come to the dialogue and everything will be well understood. It can go either way. But again, if you have a relationship and alliances, a partnership that is already invested time and value over the years, then definitely you have that leisure and the convenience to reach out and pick the conversation where you left previously. It's just like friendship. So the community relationships are the same way as well, and that's what we focus on in our interfaith partnerships, is that we continuously stay connected. We try to do service work together. We learn about each other's traditions, rituals, and faith, literature as well. But then we also build our relationship around the service models. Same thing I would say would apply for students on campuses as well. It's not going to happen overnight. So, there are a lot of student bodies like MSA, Hilal, PSA, and Palestinian Students Associations. I'm sure a lot of other cultural associations that exist on OSU campuses as well. We need to make sure that these student bodies are having consistent opportunities to dialogue, work together, and have common humanitarian efforts that they can procure or work together on. And once you bring people together on service-oriented models, then the learning and the empathy and the apathy aspect all kind of naturally starts building up. And again, we also understand with students, you graduate in 4 years or 3 years or 8 years and then move on, and then there's a new wave of students. So if you have these processes and these relationships on the organizational level, in existence, then that helps, easy transition of the new wave of students and new wave of academics, kind of like continue that partnership as well. Again, it's easier said than done. It's definitely going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight. And same thing on the, rebuilding aspect, when these relationships are tarnished or, are fractured, the rebuilding of those relationships also take time. And sometimes they take a lot more time, a lot more TLC, tender love and care, compared to building a new relationship. An existing refractured, relationship rebuilding takes a lot more time sometimes. So again, this is it's not rocket science. It's not very difficult. I would not say it's not impossible. I don't want to dishearten people who are listening to us here today. That it's not doable. It's doable. It takes time, but it also takes temperament, aptitude, and patience. And people on both sides, on multiple sides, it's an initiative that they all have to commit to and make that conviction happen. That's exactly, 25, 30 years ago, the interfaith work was very scarce here in Greater Columbus area. But when we saw these opportunities that, in times of losses and tragedies, we were often at time being isolated, and that isolation can be a terrible experience as well for a community or individuals. So we decided that, hey, why don't we build these partnerships and be there for each other's support? Because at the end of the day, what happens in the other parts of the world, it impacts us really. I mean, it touches us because many of us might have direct relationship with people who are either oppressing or are victims on the other side of the world. But how do we deal with people who are in our local ecology? They're our neighbors, they're our friends, they're our community, they're our colleagues, they're our bosses, they're our direct reports. How do we work? I mean, we don't want to bring that conflict into our homes. So that's where I think, being mindful and being very intentional about creating relationships and investing into these relationships and partnerships is very important. And again, I think if we can create a model community here in Central Ohio, I'm sure that's built on these principles, it can be replicated in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah. What do the others of you have to say on this question?
I think oftentimes when it comes to living with folks when we have very strong different opinions, sometimes it's helpful to come at things sideways, and to explore points of connection that are completely unrelated to the issue at hand, and whether that's a shared activity, a shared enemy, whether that's Michigan or a shared passion, the crew playing on Saturday, and these things can seem to be superficial, but it's also reminds us of the things that we share in common. I mean, I think to live on planet Earth right now and to speak in any setting is to risk offense. And so the question isn't if we offend anyone, it's when we do. And I know for myself, I try not to get too defensive, and try to forgive myself and forgive others and try again tomorrow. The part of that we have the most control over is ourselves. And so this is a great time for us to care for ourselves, and whatever that looks like, whatever practices and patterns sustain us, sleeping, eating. I think right now, anytime we can get outside of our minds and into our bodies, whatever those practices are, whether it's swimming, dancing, running, walking, pickleball, ultimate frisbee, anything that gets us moving and I think is good for us as individuals, and it also is good for us together.
I like that so much, Amy. I'm reading a book, which maybe you've read before, folks, but it's called The Artist's Way, and it actually attests to the idea that when we engage in writing as just a ritual every morning. First thing when you wake up, write 3 pages. Don't edit yourself. It's an active meditation, and it starts opening up certain neural pathways. And then the idea is also that you take it outside of the home, that you take a practice of what they call an artist's date. You take 5 minutes to 2 hours a week just doing something else other than what you take a date with yourself. And this idea of like putting yourself in a different place. And I'm just fascinated by it because I don't understand the science exactly, but opening up neural pathways, other ways for your mind to pave new paths. Maybe when we challenge ourselves in interesting, not always super challenging ways, it's like taking baby steps towards resolving some of the conflicts that in the world. Maybe we can get really creative about how we approach each other, not just seeing the other as the other and somebody, against whom I have to have an antipathy, a bad relationship, right? A challenging relationship. But I think there's a lot of creative ways that we can sort of approach even our own responses to others with whom we don't agree.
Well, you have anticipated one direction in which, well, in fact, my last set of questions, but they do very much resonate with what we've been hearing from some of our students, which has been that, I just cannot turn this off, that this is just screaming in the forefront of my consciousness. I can't concentrate on my classes. I can't think about anything else. I can't, have my youth. We have faculty, of course, who have their jobs to do and their books to write and all of these things, and who have been taken over. And that question of reaching moments of silence where you can turn it off, I think is a very big challenge for people who are caught up in the conflict. Let me perhaps ask then about a specific academic challenge. But again, I think a challenge for all of us who are committed to living in the real. We have listeners who have asked about what we can do to build community at Ohio State. And you've talked about this, at certain levels, both in terms of connections across student organizations, the ways that colleagues can exist in a kind of everyday fashion. But we have this kind of double duty. We need to de-escalate. And at the same time, we do have to figure out, it's our job to think about how world events come about, what causes are, where the consequences go, where responsibilities lie, what's to be done about them. We do actually have problem solving as our mission, and that requires not the kind of language that allows us to have our differences, but it forces us to actually seek clear terms and map things out in ways that for the moment maybe can't necessarily be done communally. I don't know, but what do we do to both respect one another's stances and starting points and still get to the point of doing our jobs?
I can take a stab at that. I think first off, it's very difficult to kind of tune ourselves out of the social media or news or the information exposure in general, especially in today's world. So social media definitely keeps us all connected. There's a lot of positive and there's a lot of negatives to that as well. I think communication is definitely the key forward, keeping the dialogues in a very healthy and positive way with respect and cordiality is very important, whether it's from student to faculty or faculty student, or whether it's between the faculties and between the student bodies as well. One thing that, I've actually, we all have children and we all kind of are experiencing this as well. the etiquette of communication on social media, even though it's just a new culture, it's a new era and a new genre that we're living in, it's just very different than what we, especially like, our age demographic would probably, associate to. So definitely, I think having that etiquette of debate, etiquette of respect, etiquette of conversation on social media, that definitely can, be better with a little bit of improvements as well. We all have to understand that, the way I may write something in an email or in a text message might be not read the same way with the same compassion or with the same tone and tempo on the other side. So I have to be very mindful that, sometimes, these social media debates can also add a lot to our personal understanding and our experiences as well. So of course, I don't want to derail the conversation to that direction, but having that healthy etiquette is very important in our conversation, whether on social media or whether in person as well. Now, one thing, again, going back to the COVID, is that we all missed and we all kind of long for was that the human connection. Yeah, I mean, Zoom and technology and video conferencing was working great for that 2 or 3 years of time frame. But at the end of that, we all were missing that human connection, the human component of our lives, because that's what, we biologically and mentally and spiritually need, that the connectivity to the community at the end of the day. So I think for the student bodies and the faculties on campus, my recommendation would be to try to have more in-person meetings, and again maintain that level of dignity and cordiality and respect for each other's conversation and dialogue. That's very important, because what value you can bring in person with your body language and your presence and your empathy that you can create and the ambiance, that is priceless. We all can attest to that, because we all, again, during pandemic, we felt that absence being on Zoom calls and conferences. In addition, I would also say that, again, relationship building takes time, and relationship building and cordiality comes when both sides have enough trust built into that, conversation, or into that project, or into that commitment that you're working comprehensively. So again, bringing that cordial component, empathy, thoughtfulness, mindfulness, and also try to understand where the other person or other group of people might be coming from, because their living experiences or their exposures in life may not have been the same as mine or the person who is receiving it on the other side. So, and again, both sides have to understand that as well. And again, that's only going to happen when you're able to build that connectivity to people's mind, heart, and then build that empathetical environment where people feel that this is a safe space. I can come in, I can be myself, I can talk about, my issues, my concerns, my voices, and then, be heard. And then also maybe we can collectively be able to find a solution forward. And I think these are the aspects, some of those basics for relationship building that I've learned over the last 35 years of my work in this community services line of work. And I hope that that can be followed by others as well, and hopefully that will bring value to their experiences.
So with co-presence, we work towards common sensing, maybe. Yeah. What about Amy, Sharon? What would you advise us?
I think it's a really hard time to be on campus, whether you're a student or faculty person or in some way connected to the university. And I really have a lot of compassion right now. It is so hard. I think universities are tremendous petri dishes for meaningful conversations and perhaps even movement building. I do personally, because it's been a little while since I've been out of the campus, even though I worked for Hillel at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill for a while. I have fear that while constructive conversations are likely happening on university campuses, we're also seeing an overwhelming impulse to, what it seems to me, to pressure each other to choose a side and to make statements on morality And that's a pressurizing the spaces you exist in, both in and out of the classroom. And some see the classroom as a space for political advocacy and mobilization, and others see it as a place to foster common ground across our differences. And so my question is like, how to create meaningful engagement and do it in a way that's really true to who we are. And I think one of the ways that we might be able to do that is to keep it really concrete as opposed to abstract. My experience as a Hillel rabbi and now a congregational rabbi taught me how to navigate a community within which there are real differences and disagreements on fundamental issues and core values. And I understand the imperative at the end of the day still for us to all fit into this big tent. So we can and should have opinions, but we also have to learn how for all of us to fit. And I think one way that I've learned in just the political advocacy world, and it's very convenient that we live right here with a state house in our hometown, is that we need to connect stories to people. I just had a really hard but beautiful conversation with one of my adult children last night, where we didn't see eye to eye on the conflict. And my child told me a story, and I felt the need to tell a story on the other side, right? And this is how we feel like we have to arm ourselves. But I think if we can sort of appreciate the kaleidoscope of stories, of narratives that are out there, and to say, again, this can exist and this can exist. And they may not fit very neatly into our narrative about this conflict, because I mean, I challenge anybody to really make any good sense. It is just all so painful. And this compulsion to take sides is really, really hard. But I try to just ask myself, what's the goal of our being here? When I used to be a hospice chaplain and I saw a dying person in the room and people are chattering over here about, you know, what's going to happen to the will and what's going to happen to the estate and everything like that, I would say, let's just bring it back to the people, the person in the bed who's dying. And I hate to make that analogy right here to this conflict, but we have to remember that there are real Palestinians, real Israelis, real Muslims, real Christians, real Jews, all these experiences. And for us to even hold maybe just one story of an Israeli Jew, one story of a Palestinian Muslim or Christian, and to be able to just appreciate what they each are coming with. I mean, that I think, and I was going back to skipped the part about the State House. Whenever I go and lobby my representative, my congressperson, you're told, come with a story, because you need to leave somebody with something to hold on to. They need to see an image in their mind. So if we can help each other by providing stories that maybe just to help expand our repertoire of what's happening, so that the human heart, as fragile as it feels in this moment, doesn't stop beating, because that's the only way I think we're going to be able to pave a path forward. And I do think that that's the responsibility of congregations, and also maybe of the university as well.
Thank you. Amy, you want to add in?
Like Sharon, I have just deep sympathy and understanding for how hard it is right now on campuses everywhere. And I'm also aware that in another week or so, folks will be leaving campus and having some time away, and hopefully that'll be true for those who work as well. And I've been thinking about what would be helpful for folks to do. I know for myself, one of the gifts of being a part of a community of faith is that we have really little young people and we have really old people too. And the perspective that both of those ends of life give, they don't change any of these dynamics, but they provide grounding and perspective. And I also wonder if that time away will be an opportunity to simply rest. And I think rest is just absolutely underrated. And an opportunity to be outside, an opportunity to touch and experience beauty, and also I would offer an invitation for people to connect with whatever their deep story is, whatever their faith tradition or whatever the stories that have shaped them and they carry around that are deeply rooted. And I think those are things that can simply help us remember who we are and remember the world we want to live in, and maybe give us all just a little bit of energy and courage to try to shape that world.
That is, I think, all very good advice for us to think about how going forward. And so with that, I will thank all of you for attending and listening at a time when attending and listening are complex matters. And above all, to thank our speakers, again, Imran Malik, Sharon Mars, and Amy Miracle, for their care and generosity in helping us think about how we begin to fix things, which is so much harder than smashing them in the first place. So as we work towards repair, we're grateful to you for your advice in the matter. Thank you all, and we wish you all a good afternoon.